In the cold shadows of an indifferent city, a 7-year-old girl survives alongside her siblings, invisible to the world. But everything changes when she jumps in front of a bullet to save a stranger, and unwittingly becomes the center of a tug-of-war between billionaires. Now surrounded by promises, cameras, and powerful interests, she must choose between the allure of luxury and the simplicity of a home where she can, at last, just be a kid. If you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's get back to it. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. In the beating heart of New York City, where mirrored skyscrapers reflect the gray sky and illuminated storefronts promise worlds many will never reach, a small life was unfolding in the shadows. Haley was only 7 years old, but she carried on her narrow shoulders the responsibility of someone who had lived much longer. Her large, observant brown eyes captured every movement of the city with the precision of someone who had learned that survival was a matter of paying attention to the details. Under an overpass in the Bronx, hidden by a worn-out blue tarp that once covered construction materials, Haley shared the space with her 2 younger siblings. Michael was 5 and still had that dreamy quality of a child who believes in happy endings. Leah, at just 3, clung to her older sister as if she were her safe harbor in the middle of an endless storm. It had been months since their mother had passed away. No one spoke about it openly, but Haley carried the memory like a wound that never fully healed. The illness had arrived silently and relentlessly, taking with it the only person who held their small family together. With no ID, no money, and no one to turn to, the 3 children were left adrift in a city that moves too fast to notice those left behind. Haley learned quickly. She learned that the restaurants on 42nd Street threw out perfectly good food after 10 at night. She learned that the security guard at the mall at Columbus Circle would let her use the bathroom, if she arrived early before the crowds. She learned that some cops had compassionate eyes, while others preferred to pretend that invisible children didn't exist. And above all, she learned that keeping Michael and Leah safe meant being smart, being fast, and most importantly, being invisible. Invisibility was her armor. While other homeless people drew attention, yelling, begging, Haley taught her siblings to be discreet. Clean clothes when possible, faces washed in public fountains, strategic silence. She knew that social workers meant separation. She knew that shelters were temporary and that siblings often weren't kept together. So, she kept them hidden, protected, by the illusion that maybe if they were invisible enough, the world would leave them in peace. The nights were the worst. Michael had nightmares and would wake up crying, calling for their mum. Leah shivered from the cold even on the warmest days, her fragile little body never seeming to get completely warm. And Haley would stay awake, holding them both, softly humming the same songs their mother used to sing. She didn't know all the right words, but she improvised, creating melodies that soothed their cries and pushed away the weight of reality for a few hours. During the day while Michael and Leah stayed hidden under the tarp, Haley went on her survival missions. She knew every corner, every alley, every opportunity in the neighborhood. She knew where to find plastic bottles to sell, where to get clean drinking water, where to get donated clothes without having to stand in lines that would attract the authorities' attention. She had a mental map of the city built out of necessity, where every marked spot meant a chance to keep her family alive for one more day. It was on one of these trips that Haley met Mrs. Maria. The woman who owned a small bakery on a side street in Hell's Kitchen had a motherly way about her that made Haley feel a pang of longing. At first, Mrs. Maria would just leave some day-old bread outside the shop, as if for the pigeons. But Haley noticed the pattern. Always at the same time, always in the same spot, always wrapped in a clean plastic bag. One day, Mrs. Maria called Haley into the bakery. The girl hesitated, ready to run at the slightest sign of danger, but the woman just offered her a glass of warm milk and a slice of cake. "You have siblings, don't you?" Mrs. Maria asked, her voice so gentle it didn't demand an answer. Haley nodded, suspicious. "Bring them tomorrow. Come early before the morning rush. I'll leave something for you." And so, a quiet routine began. 3 times a week, before dawn, Haley, Michael, and Leah would appear at the back door of the bakery. Mrs. Maria never asked questions, never threatened to call anyone. She just left food, sometimes clean clothes, once even a thick blanket. "Why do you do this?" Haley asked one morning, when gratitude finally overcame her. Usual caution. Mrs. Maria looked away at some distant point only she could see. "I had a daughter once," she said simply. "She'd be about your age." Haley didn't ask any more questions. Some stories were too heavy to be shared, and she knew all too well the weight of things left unsaid. But even with Mrs. Maria's help, life on the streets was a constant battle. Haley saw how people looked at them when they couldn't be completely invisible. Some with pity, others with disgust, most with indifference. She saw elegant couples leaving expensive restaurants, wasting more food in one night than she could gather in a week. She saw kids her age with colorful backpacks, heading to school, complaining about homework, living in a parallel world that seemed unreachable. Sometimes, late at night, when Michael and Leah were finally asleep, Haley allowed herself to dream. She dreamed of a real room with solid walls and a roof that didn't leak. She dreamed of a soft bed, with clean sheets that smelled like fabric softener. She dreamed of seeing her siblings playing in a yard without fear, without hunger, without the constant watchful eye she had to maintain. But the dreams always ended with the sunrise, and with it returned the relentless routine of survival. It was on a night in November, when the biting New York cold turned every breath into a wisp of fog, that everything changed. Haley had just returned from her nightly search for food, carrying some discarded sandwiches from a deli. Michael and Leah were wrapped in the blanket, sleeping soundly, and she was about to join them when she heard it. A scream, sharp, desperate, cutting through the night like a blade. Haley froze. Her first rule of survival was clear. Don't get involved. Don't look for trouble. Stay invisible. But there was something in that scream, something that reminded her of her own voice when her mother got sick and she didn't know what to do. She looked at her sleeping siblings. She should ignore it. She should lie down and forget it. But her feet started moving before her mind could stop them. A cold, fine rain began to fall as Haley followed the sound. She knew these streets well, but she had never ventured this far at night. The scream came again, closer now, accompanied by angry voices. Turning a corner, hiding behind a dumpster, Haley saw the scene. A luxurious, gleaming black car was parked in an alley. A man was holding a boy by the arm, and another, more aggressive man was gesturing threateningly. The boy, who looked to be about 10, was wearing expensive clothes and his face was a mask of terror. Haley couldn't understand the whole conversation, but she caught stray words. Ransom. Money. His father. Her heart pounded. She knew what this was. She had seen similar situations before, had heard whispered stories among the homeless about rich kids who became targets. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to go back to her siblings, to pretend she saw nothing. But then the boy looked directly at her. Their eyes met for a brief second, and in that gaze, Haley saw everything she herself felt every day. Fear, desperation, a silent plea for help. And then, without thinking, without a plan, Haley acted. She burst out from behind the dumpster, screaming as loud as she could. "Help! Police! Somebody call the cops!" Her voice echoed off the alley walls, amplified by the enclosed space. The men spun around, startled by the interruption. In the moment of confusion that followed, Haley ran toward the boy. She had no plan, no idea what she would do when she got there. She just knew she couldn't let another person see that fear in someone's eyes without trying to do something. It all happened so fast. The more aggressive man lunged at her. Haley threw herself between him and the boy, her small, frail body becoming a shield. There was a violent shove, and Haley felt a sharp pain shoot through her shoulder as she slammed against the car's metal body. The impact was so hard she crumpled. To the ground, the breath knocked out of her lungs. Voices were shouting all around. Flashlight beams appeared at the entrance to the alley. The men ran, their footsteps echoing farther and farther away. And then, silence, broken only by the rain, which was now coming down hard. Haley tried to get up, but the pain in her shoulder was unbearable. She managed to turn her head and saw the boy, still standing, unharmed, staring at her with wide eyes. "Are you okay?" she managed to whisper, before darkness started to creep into the edges of her vision. The boy knelt beside her. "You saved me," he said, his voice trembling. "You saved me." Haley tried to smile, but the pain was too much. "Run," she managed to say. "Go, get help." But before she could say anything else, men in suits came running. One of them scooped the boy into his arms, checking to see if he was hurt. Another knelt beside Haley, taking off his coat to cover her. "Call an ambulance, now!" he yelled to someone. Haley wanted to say no, wanted to say they couldn't take her, that she had to get back to her siblings. But the words wouldn't come out. Everything was getting fuzzy, the voices mixing with the sound of the rain. The last thing she saw before she passed out was the boy's face, looking down at her, with an expression of gratitude and concern she would never forget. When Haley woke up, the world was different. Bright white lights hurt her eyes. There was a strong smell of disinfectant in the air. Machines beeped around her, emitting rhythmic, constant sounds. She tried to move, but her whole body ached. "Easy, sweetie. You're safe now," a soft female voice said beside her. Haley turned her head, the movement sending waves of pain through her neck. A nurse, with her hair in a tight bun and kind eyes, was smiling at her. Where am I?" Haley managed to ask, her voice hoarse and weak. "You're at Mount Sinai Hospital. You had a big scare last night, but you're recovering well." Hospital. The word echoed in Haley's mind, bringing with it a tsunami of panic. Hospitals meant questions. Questions meant social workers. And social workers meant my brother and sister. Haley tried to sit up, ignoring the pain that exploded in her shoulder. "Where are they? Michael and Leah, I need to—" Whoa, easy!" The nurse gently held her shoulders, keeping her from getting up. "Your siblings are safe. They were found and are being taken care of. You need to rest now." "No." Tears started streaming down Haley's face. "You don't understand. You can't separate us. I promised I'd take care of them. I promised." The door to the room opened, and a man walked in. He was tall, wearing an expensive but wrinkled suit, as if he'd slept in it. His eyes were red and swollen. When he saw Haley, was awake, his face lit up with relief. "You're awake," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank God you're awake." Haley looked at him confused. She didn't know this man. "Who are you?" she asked, still trying to figure out where she was and what was happening. The man approached the bed but kept a respectful distance. "My name is Robert. Robert Miller. You saved my son last night. Ethan." The memory came back in flashes. The alley, the screams, the scared boy, the pain. "Is he okay?" Haley asked immediately. The boy, Ethan. "Is he okay?" Robert nodded, and Haley could see tears forming in his eyes. "He's perfect. Because of you. You put your life on the line to save my son, a child you didn't even know. I couldn't let them," Haley said simply, as if that explained everything. "Your siblings," Robert continued, his voice growing steadier. "Michael and Leah. They're in a temporary placement right now, but they're safe and being very well cared for. I've personally made sure of it. No one is going to separate them from you." Haley studied him, searching for lies, for false promises. But all she saw was absolute sincerity. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this for us?" Robert sat in a chair next to the bed. "Because you did something few people would have the courage to do. Because you gave me my son back. And because—" He hesitated, as if the next words were hard to say. "Because I found something out while you were unconscious." Haley frowned, confused. "The doctors needed information about you, so we looked for any records we could find. Your name, your history, and we discovered something unbelievable." Robert pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. Did you know your mother? Did you know her name?" "Julia," Haley said automatically. "Julia Marie Smith." Robert nodded slowly. "Julia. My sister. My sister who disappeared 15 years ago after a family fight." The room seemed to spin around Haley. She stared at the man, looking for some resemblance, some connection that would make sense. Your sister? I looked for her for years, Robert said, his voice breaking. But she had changed her name, gone into hiding. She was too proud to come back after our fight, and when I finally picked up her trail, I was too late. She had already... He trailed off, unable to continue. She got sick, Haley finished softly, and she couldn't afford treatment. Robert closed his eyes, the pain evident on his face. If I had known, if I had found her in time... She never mentioned having a brother, Haley said, trying to process this impossible information. Her pride was as big as mine, Robert admitted. We fought over stupid things, and neither of us had the courage to back down. And now... He looked at Haley with an intensity that made her feel exposed. Now you're here. My niece, my sister's daughter. Haley didn't know what to say. She had spent so long alone, responsible only for Michael and Leah, that the idea of having family, of having someone, seemed unreal. I want to help you, Robert said, his voice firm but gentle. I want to help you and your siblings, not as charity but as family, because you are family. But before Haley could answer, before she could fully process the revelation, the door opened again. A woman entered, holding a tablet, her face urgent. Mr. Miller, sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see. She held the tablet out to him. Robert took the device, and Haley saw his eyebrows shoot up in surprise as he read. What is it? He asked. The story leaked, the woman explained. About what happened last night. About Haley saving Ethan. It's everywhere. And there's more. Robert kept reading, his expression shifting from surprise to shock. More what? Haley asked, feeling fear creep back into her chest. Robert looked at her, and there was something in his eyes Haley couldn't decipher. It seems you've become national news, and there are people, a lot of people, who want to meet you. In that moment, without yet knowing it, Haley's life changed completely. What she had done on that rainy night in a New York alley would reverberate far beyond anything she could have imagined. Her invisibility, the armor that had kept her safe for so long, had been shattered. And the world, with all its complexity, its good intentions, and its hidden dangers, was about to find out who the girl who risked everything to save a stranger really was. Haley didn't fully grasp the meaning of Robert's words until the next morning, when she woke up to find 3 security guards posted outside her hospital room. The nurse who brought her breakfast had a nervous smile, and Haley knew immediately that something had drastically changed overnight. There are a lot of people who want to talk to you, the nurse said as she adjusted Haley's pillows. Journalists, reporters, even people from TV. The lobby downstairs is packed. I've never seen anything like it. Haley's stomach churned. She had spent years learning to be invisible, and now, suddenly, all the eyes in the country seemed to be on her. It was the opposite of everything that had kept her safe. It was dangerous. It was terrifying. Robert came in shortly after, accompanied by a middle-aged woman he introduced as Mariah, his personal lawyer. Both wore serious, worried expressions. Haley, we need to talk about what's happening, Robert began, pulling a chair closer to the bed. Your story has spread much faster than I ever imagined. The security camera footage has been shared millions of times. Newspapers all over the world are running stories about you. I don't want to be famous, Haley said immediately, her voice small but firm. I just want my brother and sister. Can I see them? Robert and Mariah exchanged a look that Haley couldn't quite interpret. You'll see them this afternoon, Robert assured her. But first, we need to discuss some important things. There are a lot of people who want to help you and your siblings. People with resources who can offer incredible opportunities. What kind of people? Haley asked, suspicious. Mariah opened a briefcase she was carrying and started pulling out documents. In the last 18 hours, we've received 7 formal proposals from different families, expressing interest in providing support for you. Some of these families are, well, they're some of the wealthiest and most influential people in the United States. Haley stared at the papers, not fully understanding. What does providing support mean? Robert took a deep breath. Some want to help financially. Others are offering to pay for education, housing, medical care. And some, he hesitated, some are interested in adoption. The word landed like a bomb in the quiet room. Adoption. Haley had heard that word before, in the whispered conversations of the social workers she avoided on the streets. She knew it meant a new family, a new life, but it also meant leaving behind everything she knew. "I don't need a new family," Haley said firmly. "I have a family, Michael and Leah. They're my family." "And they always will be," Robert said quickly. "Any proposal we consider has to include the three of you together. That's non-negotiable." Before Haley could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. The security guard outside poked his head in. "Mr. Miller, a Mrs. Beatrice Thompson is here. She says she has an appointment." Robert glanced at his watch and nodded. "Let her in." An elegant woman entered the room. She was in her 50s with impeccably styled blonde hair and clothes that screamed wealth without needing visible labels. But what caught Haley's attention most were her eyes. There was a deep sadness in them, old and poorly healed. "Haley," she said, her voice soft and controlled, "my name is Beatrice Thompson. It's an honor to meet you." Haley said nothing, just watched as the woman approached the bed with measured steps. "I read about what you did, about your courage, about how you took care of your siblings alone for so long." Beatrice paused as if the next words were difficult. "I lost my daughter 3 years ago. She was your age. A sudden illness the doctors couldn't cure in time. Since then, my house has been too empty, too quiet. My husband and I have unlimited resources, but we had no purpose until we read about you." Haley felt a pang of something in her chest. Empathy, maybe, a recognition of pain, but also caution. She had learned that shared pain didn't automatically mean trust. "I would like to offer you and your siblings a home," Beatrice continued. "A house in Scarsdale, with a yard, a pool, individual rooms for each of you, the best private, schools in New York, continuous medical and psychological support, travel, experiences, everything children should have, and most importantly, love, a family." It was a generous offer. Anyone could see that. But Haley heard something in the words that bothered her. It wasn't about them. It was about filling a void, about replacing something that was lost. "Thank you for the offer," Haley said politely, the way her mother had taught her to be courteous, even when she disagreed. "But I need to think." Beatrice nodded, clearly expecting this response. "Of course, I'll leave my contact information with Mr. Miller. Take your time, but know that my door is always open." After she left, there was a moment of silence. Mariah was the one to break it. "She was the first. There are 6 more waiting to speak with you over the next few days, all with similar proposals, all with immense resources." "Why do so many people want to adopt someone they don't even know?" Haley asked, genuinely confused. Robert sighed. "Some have genuine reasons, like Beatrice. They've lost children, they want to fill that void. Others see an opportunity to do something good, to use their resources to change lives, and some—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Some see an opportunity to improve their public image, to be seen as heroes too. So it's about them, not us," Haley concluded, with an insight that surprised even herself. "Not always," Mariah interjected. "But you need to understand that your story has touched a lot of people, and people with resources want to help. The question is figuring out who's helping for the right reasons." The rest of the day was a blur of conversations, proposals, and promises. A real estate mogul offered a mansion and unlimited education funds. An heiress from an old New York family spoke of tradition and legacy. A famous doctor promised the best treatments and lifelong care. Each had their story, their motives, their tempting offers. But Haley could only think of one thing: Michael and Leah. Where were they? How were they? Were they scared? Did they miss her? Finally, in the middle of the afternoon, Robert announced it was time to see them. Haley was taken in a wheelchair, still recovering from her injuries, through hospital corridors to a private room where at last she saw her siblings. "Haley!" Michael shouted, running toward the chair. Leah followed close behind, slower, but with the same urgency. Haley hugged them with all the strength she had, ignoring the pain in her shoulder, feeling tears stream freely down her face. They smelled of soap and shampoo, were wearing clean new clothes, their hair washed and combed. But they were the same. her siblings, her family. "You disappeared," Michael said, his little voice accusatory but filled with worry. "You promised you'd never disappear." I know. I'm sorry," Haley whispered, kissing the top of his head. "But I'm here now. We're together." Leah said nothing, just clung to Haley as if she feared she would vanish again if she let go. The social worker caring for them, a young woman named Sarah, watched the scene with teary eyes. "They've been so brave," she told Robert, "but they've asked for you every 5 minutes." "Where were you?" Haley asked her siblings. "In a big house," Michael explained excitedly, "with other kids. And there was food, Haley. So much food. And real beds. And toys." Leah finally loosened her grip enough to look at her. "But you weren't there," she whispered, and those 4 words broke Haley's heart into a million pieces. "I know, sweetie, but we're going to stay together now, I promise." Robert approached carefully. "Hi, Michael. Hi, Leah. My name is Robert. I'm your uncle." Michael looked at Haley, confused. "Uncle?" "It's a long story," Haley said, "but he's our mum's brother. He's helping us." Ethan, Robert's son, shyly entered the room just then. He was 10, with dark hair and eyes that showed both intelligence and sensitivity. When he saw Haley, his face lit up. "You're better," he said, coming closer. "The doctors said you'd be okay, but I was worried." "I'm fine," Haley assured him. "Thanks to you getting help so fast." Ethan shook his head vigorously. "No, thanks to you. You saved me. You didn't even know me, and you saved me." He looked at Michael and Leah. "Your sister is a hero." Michael immediately puffed out his chest with pride. "I know. She always takes care of us. She's the best sister in the world." In that moment, seeing her siblings safe, seeing the genuine gratitude in Ethan's eyes, seeing Robert watch it all with emotion, Haley had a moment of clarity. Her life had irrevocably changed. There was no going. Back to the overpass, to the worn-out blue tarp, to the cold nights and hungry days. But what came next? Which path should she choose? The following days were intense and exhausting. Haley received more visitors, heard more proposals, each one more elaborate than the last. She met Richard Morgan, owner of a supermarket chain, who offered a life of stability and future business opportunities. She met Sofia Rodriguez, a famous actress who talked about exposure and opportunities in entertainment. She met Frank Costello, an influential politician who promised to use his position to ensure the best possible future. Each had their merits, each had unimaginable resources, each promised the world. But Haley noticed a pattern. They all talked about what they could offer, about mansions and cars and elite schools. No one asked what she actually wanted. No one truly listened to her. It was on the 5th day in the hospital that something different happened. Robert entered the room with a strange look on his face. "There's someone else here to see you," he said. "But this one is different." "Different how?" Haley asked. "He doesn't have billions. In fact, he's a public school teacher, a widower. Lives in a simple house in Queens, but he insisted so much on speaking with you that I thought I should give him a chance." A man walked in. He was about 45, with graying hair at his temples and simple but clean clothes. His hands were calloused, his face marked with lines that spoke of a life of work and worry, but his eyes were kind. "Hi, Haley," he said, his voice calm and unhurried. "My name is Paul Davis. I'm a math teacher." Haley waited for the grand proposal, the list of impossible offers, but Paul just pulled up a chair and sat down. "I saw your story on TV," he began, "and it reminded me of when my wife and I were young and lived on the streets too. We managed to get out of that life through a lot of hard work and help from generous people. My wife passed away 2 years ago, and the house has been empty ever since." "I'm sorry," Haley said sincerely. "Thank you. She would have liked you. She had a huge heart too." Paul paused. "I don't have mansions to offer. I don't have a pool or imported cars. I have a 3-bedroom house in a regular neighborhood, a small backyard where I have 2 rescue dogs. I have a simple teacher's routine. I wake up early, grade papers at night, live a normal life." "Then why are you here?" Haley asked, genuinely curious. Because when I saw you and your siblings, I saw myself and my wife all those years ago. I saw children who need stability, not a spectacle. I saw someone who needs a home, not a castle. And I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could offer something that these other people can't. Normalcy. A regular but safe life. Haley was silent for a long moment. There was something in Paul's simplicity that resonated with her in a way all the grand proposals hadn't. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course. I'm in no rush. And if you choose another path, that's okay too. I just wanted you to know that there are options beyond mansions and privilege. Sometimes, what we need is just a place where we can be ourselves." After Paul left, Robert sat beside Haley. "What did you think?" "He was different," Haley admitted. "Everyone else talks about what they have. He talked about who he is." "And me?" Robert asked softly. "Where do I fit into all this?" Haley looked at her uncle, this man she had discovered was family, who had been so attentive and present. "Your blood, your real family, but—" She hesitated. "But," Robert encouraged, "but your life is so big, so complex. Security guards, meetings, important people. Ethan told me about your schedule. You barely have time to breathe. How would you have time for 3 kids who need a lot of attention?" Robert flinched as if he'd been punched. "I would make time. I'd change everything if I had to." "Would you change?" Haley asked. "Or would you try to fit us into the life you already have?" It was a tough question, but a necessary one. Robert was silent for a long time. "You're very wise for a 7-year-old, he finally said. "I had to grow up fast," Haley replied simply. That night, alone in her hospital room, Haley thought about everything that had happened. A week ago, she was under an overpass, worried only about getting food for the next day. Now she had 8 different families wanting to adopt her, offering lives she couldn't even dream were possible. But what did she really want? She tried to imagine herself and her siblings in each scenario. In Beatrice's mansion, surrounded by luxury, but always feeling like they were replacements for something lost. In the businessman's house, with all the resources but also all the expectations. In Robert's hectic life, with blood family but little quality time. And then she thought of Paul's simple house. No glamour, no luxury, but with space to just be a kid. With a predictable routine, with dinners at the table, with homework and playing in the yard. With normalcy. Was that what she wanted? Normalcy? After everything she'd been through, didn't she deserve more? Didn't she deserve compensation for her suffering? But the more she thought, the more she realized that compensation wasn't the same as healing. Luxury didn't erase trauma. Money didn't replace emotional security. The door opened softly. It was Mariah, Robert's lawyer. "Sorry to bother you so late," she said, "but there's something you need to know. The media found out about the adoption proposals. It's turned into a circus out there. They're calling it The Battle for the Hero Orphans. A TV show wants to do a special. A documentary is being negotiated. Your life has become public entertainment." Haley felt nausea rise in her throat. "How do I stop it?" "You can't," Mariah said honestly. "Not completely. But you can control the narrative. You can make choices that show you're not a trophy, that you're a child with agency and a voice of her own." "How?" "First, you need to decide what you really want. Not what would be most impressive or what would make the best headline. What you, Haley, a 7-year-old girl who took care of her siblings alone for months, really want and need." It was the first time anyone had put the question in those terms, not about what was offered, but about what was needed. "I want Michael to be a kid again," Haley said slowly, letting her thoughts form into words. "I want him to stop having nightmares. I want Leah to start talking normally again without fear. I want to go to school and learn to read better. I want to have friends. I want to sleep without having to keep one eye open. I want a life where I don't have to be an adult all the time." "Those are genuine needs," Mariah said. "Now think, which of these proposals truly meets those needs? Not the ones that offer more things, but the ones that offer the right environment for healing and growth," Haley thought. The mansions were impressive but intimidating. The elite schools sounded good on paper, but would she feel out of place? The high society lives would bring new pressures, new expectations. Would she be trading one kind of survival for another? The teacher, Haley said finally, Paul. He offered what I really need, not what's impressive, but what heals. Mariah smiled. That's a brave choice. It's going to disappoint a lot of people who were hoping for a Cinderella story. My life isn't a fairy tale, Haley replied. It's real, and it needs real solutions, not fantasies. Are you sure? Because once you announce this, there's no going back. The other offers will likely disappear. This is your only chance to have access to that kind of resource. Haley thought of her mother, of how she always said that wealth wasn't in things, but in people. She thought of Mrs. Maria and her simple bakery, which had been more important than any mansion. She thought of her siblings and what they really needed. I'm sure, she said. The next morning, Robert arranged a meeting with all the prospective guardians. Haley insisted on being there, even against medical advice. She wanted them to see her face when she made her decision. The room was full. Beatrice in her impeccable suit, Richard with his entourage of assistants, Sophia with her PR team, Frank with his political aides, 4 others Haley had met briefly, and in the corner, almost out of place amidst so much opulence, was Paul with his simple shirt and unshakable calm. Mariah began the meeting by explaining the legal process of adoption, the rights of the children, the next steps. But Haley interrupted her. "Can I speak?" she asked. All eyes turned to her. Mariah nodded. Haley stood up, still in pain, but needing to do this on her feet. "I want to thank all of you for caring, for wanting to help. I know many of you have good intentions, but I have to do what's best for me and my siblings. And what's best isn't necessarily what looks most impressive." She saw confusion on some faces, understanding, and others. "I've chosen Paul Davis to be my guardian. He doesn't have the biggest house or the most money, but he offered something I need more, a real home. Not a palace, but a home." The silence that followed was heavy. Some of the suitors looked shocked, others relieved. Beatrice had tears in her eyes but nodded in understanding. "You are a very special girl, Haley," Beatrice said. "You made the right choice, the brave choice." Richard, the businessman, stood to leave, clearly disappointed. But before he left, he stopped. "If you ever need anything at all, my office is available. Education, medical emergencies, whatever. The offer of help doesn't disappear just because I wasn't chosen." One by one, the others followed his lead, some with more grace than others, but all acknowledging Haley's decision. And to her surprise, several left contact information, offering future help with no expectation of kinship. When the room finally emptied, only Haley, Paul, Robert, Mariah, and Sarah, the social worker, remained. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked Haley. "Because we can reverse it if you change your mind." "I'm sure," Haley confirmed. "But," she looked at Robert, "can I have 2 families? Paul is my guardian, but you as my uncle? Ethan as my cousin?" Robert let out a sigh of relief. "It would be an honor. A huge honor." "And you?" Haley looked at Paul. "Can you handle having family around? Uncles, cousins, temporary grandparents?" Paul laughed, a genuine warm sound. "The more the merrier. Family isn't a competition. It's about adding on." "Then it's settled," Mariah said, starting to prepare the paperwork. "We'll begin the guardianship process." But before they could continue, the door flew open. Robert's security guard rushed in. "Sir, the press has stormed the lobby. They found out about the meeting. They want a statement, and there's something else." "What?" Robert asked. "There's a lawyer downstairs. He says he represents the children's biological father. He's demanding parental rights." The world seemed to stop. Haley felt the floor disappear from under her. Her father? The man her mother never mentioned, who never showed up, who abandoned them. "He has no right," Haley said, her voice much louder than she intended. "He never wanted us. He never looked for us. He can't just show up now." Paul knelt in front of her, holding her shoulders gently. "Easy. We'll figure this out. No one is going to separate you, I promise." But the promise sounded hollow, because Haley knew reality. She knew how the world worked. Biological parents had rights, And if this man was interested now that there was media, money and attention involved, she wasn't sure any promise could protect them. Robert was on the phone, speaking rapidly. Mariah was already on her computer, researching legal precedents. Sarah was trying to calm Haley, while Paul remained by her side, a solid presence in the chaos. And so, just when Haley thought she had finally found a path, a new storm was gathering on the horizon. Because the battle for her guardianship was far from over, and the next opponent wasn't someone who could be simply turned away with a choice. It was someone who, by law, had rights that could override all others. It was someone who had the power to destroy everything Haley was trying to build, and she didn't know if this time she would be strong enough to fight what was coming. The chaos at the hospital lasted for hours. Journalists swarmed the lobby, cameras captured every movement, and microphones were shoved toward anyone who looked like they had information. The story of the heroic girl who chose simplicity over wealth was sensational enough. But now, with the sudden appearance of a biological father claiming his rights, the narrative had gained a new layer of drama that the media devoured with insatiable greed. Haley sat on her hospital bed, hugging Michael and Leah, who had been brought to her room when the commotion started. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they could feel Haley's fear, and that scared them too. Robert was on the phone with his lawyers. Mariah typed furiously on her laptop, preparing documents. Paul remained seated beside the bed, a calm presence in the storm, holding Haley's hand whenever she started to tremble. Sarah, the social worker, entered the room with a worried expression. "We need to talk about the legal situation. Mr. Henry Clark's lawyer is being very insistent. He's threatening to file a lawsuit if we don't allow a meeting." "Henry Clark?" Haley repeated the name, testing it on her tongue. It was the first time she had heard her father's full name. Her mother never spoke of him, always changing the subject when Haley asked. All she knew was that he had left before she was born and never came back. "You don't have to see him if you don't want to," Paul said firmly. "No one can force you." "Actually," Mariah interjected, looking up from her screen, "legally, he has the right to request visitation. He's the biological father and there's no court order against him." "Yet." "Yet?" Robert questioned. "I'm looking into it. If we can prove intentional abandonment and prolonged neglect, we can argue for the termination of his parental rights. But it's a long and complicated process, and he knows that. That's why he's shown up now when there's public attention. He knows any judge will hesitate to deny a father's rights with the whole country watching." Anger, hot and intense, rose in Haley's chest. "He didn't care about us when we were on the street, when we were hungry, when Mom was sick and needed help, but now that there are cameras and money involved, he wants to be a father." "Exactly," Mariah agreed, "and we need to prove that. But to prove it, you might have to see him. Talk to him, let him incriminate himself." "No," Paul said immediately. "She's a child. We're not going to use her as bait in a legal game." "It's not a game," Mariah countered. "It's her life. And if we don't do this, he could win visitation rights. Worse, he could win shared custody. Do you understand what that means? Haley and her siblings would have to spend time with a man who abandoned them, just because he decided to show up at a convenient moment." A heavy silence filled the room. Haley looked at Michael and Leah, who were watching her with wide, trusting eyes. They believed she would always know what to do, that she would always keep them safe. But how could she protect them from this? "I'll do it," Haley said finally, her voice small but determined. "I'll see him, but on my terms." Everyone looked at her. "I want you all in the room," she continued, looking at Robert, Paul and Sarah. "I want everything recorded. And if I say I want to stop, the conversation ends. Immediately." Mariah nodded. "We can do that. I'll arrange everything." The meeting was scheduled for the next day in a hospital conference room that was specially prepared. Discreet cameras were installed, hidden microphones were in place, and witnesses were positioned. Michael and Leah would stay with Ethan and Robert's wife on another floor, far from any tension. Haley didn't sleep that night. She lay awake, imagining what it would be like to see the man who had created her but never known her. Would he look like her? Would he have the same brown eyes, the same high forehead? Or would he be a complete stranger, with no connection beyond biology? When morning came, She was exhausted and nervous. Paul helped her get dressed, choosing simple but dignified clothes. They didn't want her to look like a fragile victim, but they didn't want any pretense either. Hayley needed to look exactly like what she was, an ordinary child who had been through extraordinary things. Henry Clark arrived promptly at 10 o'clock. Hayley heard his voice in the hallway before she saw him, a deep voice discussing details with his lawyer. Then the door opened, and he walked in. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with dark hair starting to grey at the temples. He wore a suit that looked new, as if it had been bought for the occasion, and, yes, he had the same brown eyes as Hayley, the same bone structure in his face. Seeing her own reflection in a stranger was unsettling. "Hayley," he said, and there was genuine emotion in his voice, or at least it sounded genuine. "You've grown so much. You're so big." Hayley said nothing. She just watched as he approached, his movements careful, as if approaching a frightened animal. "I know you have questions," Henry continued when he realized she wasn't going to respond. "I know you must be confused about why I'm here now, and I have explanations." "Then explain," Hayley said, her voice colder than she intended. Henry glanced at the other adults in the room, as if asking for privacy, but no one moved. He sighed and pulled up a chair, sitting in front of Hayley, but maintaining a respectful distance. "When I met your mother, I was very young, 23. I was just starting my life, trying to build a career. And then she got pregnant with you. I panicked. I wasn't ready to be a father. I had no money, no stability. So I ran. It was the most cowardly and selfish decision of my life." Hayley kept her expression neutral, but inside every word was a blade. "After you were born, I tried a few times to get in touch with Julia. I sent money when I could, but she always sent it back, said she didn't want anything from me, that she was too proud to accept scraps of my guilt." "My mother never mentioned that," Hayley said, "because she wanted to protect you. She didn't want you to grow up knowing your father was a coward who ran away." Henry paused, his hands trembling slightly. "But then I stopped trying. I married another woman, tried to start a new life. I pretended you didn't exist because it was easier than facing my own shame." "And now?" Hayley asked. "Why now?" "Because I saw your picture in the paper. I saw what you did, how you saved that boy, how you took care of your siblings alone. And I realized that you became the incredible person you are in spite of me, not because of me. And that destroyed me." It was a moving story, touching even. But Hayley had learned to read people. She'd had to survive on the streets. And there was something in Henry's eyes, a hesitation, a subtle falseness she couldn't ignore. "You got married again," Hayley observed. "Do you have other children?" Henry hesitated before answering. "I have a son, from my second marriage. Philip. He's 5. And does your wife know about me?" Another hesitation. "She does now. She saw the news like everyone else. She was shocked. She didn't know I had a daughter." "So you lied to her," Hayley concluded. "You hid our existence." "It wasn't that simple." "It seems pretty simple," Hayley interrupted. "You started a new family and pretended the first one didn't exist. And you only came back now because everyone is watching. Because it would look bad if you didn't show up." Henry's lawyer, who had been silent until then, shifted uncomfortably. "Hayley, your father is trying to do the right thing now. Everyone makes mistakes." "Mistakes?" Hayley turned to the lawyer, her voice rising. "Mistakes are forgetting to buy milk or being late for work. Abandoning 3 children to starve on the streets isn't a mistake. It's a choice. He chose not to be there. He chose his comfortable new family. And he only came back because now there are spotlights." "That's not fair," Henry protested. "I didn't know you were on the streets. I thought Julia had family, support." "You thought?" Hayley laughed, but it was a humorless sound. "You didn't think anything. You didn't want to know. There's a difference." Robert, who had been leaning against the wall watching everything, decided to step in. "Mr. Clark, with all due respect, what exactly do you want here? Because if it's custody, you need to understand that these children have already suffered enough trauma. They need stability, not more turmoil." "I want to know my children," Henry said. "I want to..." Be a part of their lives. I want to fix my mistakes." "How convenient," Mariah muttered, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "To be a part of their lives now that there's a $10 million trust fund involved." Henry's face turned red. "It's not about the money, isn't it?" Mariah opened a folder. "Because we did a little research on you, Mr. Clark. Your consulting firm went bankrupt 6 months ago. You have significant debt. Your second marriage is in financial trouble. And suddenly, when your biological daughter becomes national news with promises of substantial financial support, you appear wanting to exercise your parental rights. The coincidences are fascinating, don't you think?" The silence that followed was charged. Henry opened and closed his mouth several times, searching for words that wouldn't come. I deserve a chance," he finally managed to say. "Everyone deserves a second chance." Haley studied him. She saw desperation there, yes, but it wasn't the desperation of a father wanting to reconnect with his lost children. It was the desperation of someone drowning in problems and seeing a life raft. "You want a second chance?" Haley asked calmly. "Where were you when we needed a first chance? Where were you when my mother was sick, begging for help? Where were you when Michael cried from hunger every night? Where were you when Leah stopped talking because she was too traumatized?" Each question was an indictment, and Henry shrank with each one. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," Haley corrected. "And that's the truth. You didn't want to know because it was inconvenient. But now it's convenient. Now there are cameras, money, attention. Now you can be the heroic father who came back to rescue his children. A good story for the media, isn't it?" Tears began to stream down Henry's face. Maybe they were genuine. Maybe it was real remorse, but Haley was past caring. "You want to meet Michael and Leah?" she continued. "You want to be part of their lives? Then start by understanding one thing. You are not their father. A father is someone who is present. A father is someone who takes care of you when it's hard, not just when it's easy. You are just the man who helped create us. Nothing more." "Haley," Henry started, but she held up her hand, cutting him off. "And as for the money you're so clearly interested in, don't even try. Because I will fight with everything I have to make sure you don't see a single penny. Because that money is for our education, our safety, our future, not to pay off your debts." Sarah, who had been documenting everything, decided to intervene. "I think we've had enough for today. Haley has made her position very clear. Mr. Clark, you have a legal right to request visitation, but you need to understand that the children's best interests come first, and right now forcing a relationship would be detrimental." Henry's lawyer was sweating. "We will be filing a formal petition." "Go ahead," Mariah cut him off, "and we'll be ready, with evidence of abandonment, neglect, and now attempted financial exploitation. You want to go to court with this, with the entire country watching? Be my guest." Henry stood up, defeated. He looked at Haley one last time, and there was something in his eyes that might have been genuine remorse. But it was too late for remorse. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. And I know you don't believe me, but it's true. I really am sorry." "I'm sorry too," Haley replied. "I'm sorry you chose to abandon us. I'm sorry you only came back for your own interests. But most of all, I'm sorry you'll never know who we really are. And that's your loss, not ours." Henry left the room hunched over, as if carrying an immense weight. His lawyer followed quickly, muttering about legal next steps, but they both knew the battle was lost before it had even begun. When the door closed, Haley fell apart. All the control, all the strength she had maintained during the confrontation evaporated. She began to cry, deep sobs that shook her small body. Paul wrapped her in a hug, letting her cry against his shoulder. "You were so brave," he whispered. "So strong. I'm so proud of you." "I wanted him to be different," Haley sobbed. "I wanted him to really care, to have come back because he loved us, not because he needed something. Is it wrong to want that?" "It's not wrong," Paul assured her. "It's completely human, and it's completely understandable." Robert came over, kneeling beside Haley's chair. "You did the right thing. You protected yourself and your siblings. Your mother would be so proud. She would hate all of this," Haley said between sobs. This whole circus, all this attention, she always wanted us to be invisible because it was safer. And now we're at the center of everything. But it will end, Sarah assured her. The media always finds the next story, and when they do, you'll be able to go back to a normal life, I promise. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's prediction began to come true. Henry tried to continue the legal fight, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Photos of Haley and her siblings on the streets while he lived comfortably with his new family. A complete lack of any attempted contact for years. Witnesses who confirmed that Julia had tried to find him when she got sick, but he had ignored all her messages. The judge who reviewed the case was direct in his ruling. Henry's parental rights were severely limited. He could request supervised visitation in the future, but only if the children expressed a desire to see him. And as for the money, a court order ensured he would have no access to or claim on any funds established for the children. It was a victory, but Haley felt no triumph, only a sadness for all that could have been if he had made different choices. Meanwhile, the guardianship process with Paul moved forward. Home visits were conducted, his house was inspected and approved, references were checked, and every step confirmed what Haley already knew. Paul was genuine in his desire to help. His house in Queens was exactly as he had described it. Simple, but welcoming. 3 small but well-kept bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled of coffee and homemade bread, a yard with grass that needed mowing and 2 dogs that ran to greet the children with unbridled enthusiasm. Michael fell in love instantly. "Can we keep the dogs?" he asked, his eyes shining. "They're yours now too," Paul said with a smile, "if you decide to stay." Leah, who rarely spoke to strangers, looked at Paul with curiosity. "What are their names?" "This one is Coffee because he's brown," Paul explained, pointing to the larger mutt. "And this little one is Brownie because he's dark and sweet." Leah laughed. It was such a rare and precious sound that Haley felt tears well up in her eyes. The bedrooms were simple but had potential. Paul had made it clear they could decorate them however they wanted. Michael wanted glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Leah wanted shelves for the books she was starting to collect. Haley just wanted a comfortable bed and curtains that would block out the morning light. The neighborhood was quiet. Ordinary families in ordinary houses living ordinary lives. Exactly what Haley wanted. There were no security guards, no media cameras, no impossible expectations. Just blessed normalcy. The local school was public and bustling. The principal, Mrs. Martin, was a sturdy woman with a firm voice but kind eyes. "We'll place you in classes appropriate for your ages," she explained, "but with extra support to make up for the time you've been out of school. No pressure, no judgment, just learning." Haley met her future teacher, Ms. Anderson, who had a warm smile and seemed genuinely excited to have her in the class. "I hear you're very brave," Ms. Anderson said. "You'll do great here. And if you need help with anything, my door is always open." For the first time in a long time, Haley began to feel something she had forgotten. Hope. Not the vague, desperate hope that things would magically get better, but real hope, based on concrete plans and trustworthy people. But not everything was simple. Haley still woke up in the middle of the night with nightmares. She still had moments of panic when she saw police officers. She still felt guilty for all the times she couldn't completely protect her siblings. The trauma didn't just disappear because her circumstances improved. It was Robert who suggested therapy. "Not just for you," he said. "For all of you. You've been through things no child should ever have to go through, and you need professional help to process it." The psychologist, Dr. Evans, specialized in childhood trauma. Her office was cozy, filled with soft pillows and toys. She never forced conversation, just let the children talk in their own time. The first few sessions were difficult. Haley didn't want to relive the bad times. She didn't want to talk about the night her mother got so weak she couldn't get up anymore. She didn't want to remember the biting cold of the nights under the overpass. She didn't want to admit how many times she had thought about giving up. But slowly, with Dr. Evans's infinite patience, Haley began to open up. And she discovered that talking didn't make the pain worse. In fact, sharing the weight made it lighter. Michael had his sessions too. He revealed fears he had hidden, recurring nightmares, separation anxiety. Leah, who spoke so little, began to use drawings to express what words couldn't. Her drawings showed darkness, but they also began to show light. Colors started to appear where before there had only been black, and little by little, very slowly, the healing began. 2 months after the day Haley saved Ethan, guardianship was officially transferred to Paul. There was no big ceremony, no cameras. It was a simple meeting at the courthouse, with papers signed and witnesses present. But when the judge banged the gavel and declared Paul the legal guardian of the 3 children, Haley felt something release in her chest. A tension she had carried for so long finally relaxed. They were safe, officially, legally, completely safe. Paul knelt in front of them after the hearing, looking into each child's eyes. "I promise to take care of you," he said. "Not perfectly, because no one is perfect, but with all the love I have. And I promise to always listen to you, always. Respect you, always fight for you. That's what family does." Michael hugged him immediately. Leah hesitated for only a second before joining in, and Haley, who had learned not to trust promises, who had seen adults fail time and time again, allowed herself to believe. She allowed herself to hope that this time, finally, the promises would be kept. That night, in the house in Queens, with Michael and Leah asleep in their new rooms, with coffee and brownie snoring in the hallway, with the smell of dinner still lingering in the air, Haley looked out her bedroom window at the stars. She thought of her mother, wondering if she could see them from up there, if she was proud, if she knew her children were finally safe. "We made it, Mom," Haley whispered to the night. "We stayed together, like you asked." And for the first time since it all began, Haley slept through the night without nightmares, without waking up to check on her siblings, without fear of what the dawn would bring. Because finally, after so long of fighting, she could just be a child. And that was more precious than any mansion or fortune could ever be. 6 months after the night that changed everything, Haley woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom curtains. It wasn't the startled awakening of someone living on constant alert, but the gradual waking of someone who had slept deeply and safely. She stretched in her bed, feeling the clean, soft sheets against her skin, and allowed herself a few minutes to just lie there, enjoying the quiet morning peace. From the backyard came the sounds of Michael playing with the dogs, his clear, carefree laughter echoing through the house. It was a sound that had become common, but one that still made Haley's heart ache with gratitude. There was a time when she thought she would never hear Michael laugh like that again. Haley got up and went to the next room, where Leah was still asleep, clutching the teddy bear Ethan had given her last month. The little girl had grown, her face losing the sickly pallor it had carried on the streets. Her cheeks were fuller, healthier, rosy. And most importantly, she smiled often now, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. In the kitchen, Paul was already making breakfast. He hummed softly as he flipped pancakes on the griddle, a morning habit Haley had come to expect and even enjoy. The comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the house. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Paul said when Haley entered, offering his usual warm smile. "I thought you were going to sleep in today. It's Saturday." "I have an important engagement today," Haley reminded him as she sat at the table. "The inauguration." Paul nodded, his expression turning more serious but proud. "That's right. Big day. Are you nervous?" "A little," Haley admitted. "There will be a lot of people. The press, too. But this time is different," Paulie observed, placing a plate of pancakes in front of her. "This time you're in control. You're there because you want to be, not because you're being hunted." He was right. The inauguration of the Haley Smith Foundation, funded with resources from the 8 billionaires who had originally tried to adopt her, was completely different from the media circus of months ago. This time, Haley had a voice, she had choices, and she had a purpose. After breakfast, as Haley helped Paul with the dishes, an activity that had become part of their bonding routine, she thought about how much had changed. Life in the Queen's house had become a real home. It wasn't perfect, of course. There were occasional arguments about undone chores, TV time limits, and homework left until the last minute. But they were the normal conflicts of a normal family. And that was exactly what Haley had always wanted. School had been a challenge at first. Haley was behind other kids her age, especially in math and science. But Ms. Anderson had been patient and dedicated, staying after school for extra tutoring, turning learning into something fun instead of frightening. And gradually, Haley began not just to catch up with her peers, but to excel. Her complex problem-solving skills, honed by years of survival on the streets, translated surprisingly well to academic puzzles. Michael was doing even better. Having just turned 5, he was in kindergarten and absolutely loved it. He made friends quickly, always coming home with new drawings and stories about his adventures on the playground. The trauma still surfaced occasionally in nightmares, but far less frequently. His therapy with Dr. Evans was working, and Leah, the most fragile when they arrived, had blossomed in a way that surprised even the professionals. She was still shy, but she had started talking more, first just with family, then with her teacher, and eventually with a few select children at school. Her vocabulary was expanding rapidly, making up for the years of silence. And her drawings, which had started out dark and frightening, now exploded with vibrant colors and happy scenes. Their relationship with Robert and his family had also found a healthy balance. They saw each other regularly, usually on Sundays for lunch at Robert's house or trips to the park. Ethan and Haley had developed a special bond, not quite siblings, but something close. He treated her with genuine respect, never as the girl who saved him, but as someone interesting in her own right. Robert had kept his promise to be a present uncle. He paid for therapy when their insurance didn't cover it. He made sure the children had everything they needed for school. He established a substantial education fund that would guarantee college for all of them when the time came. But most importantly, he listened. When Haley had doubts, fears, or just needed someone to talk to, Robert was available. He didn't try to replace Paul, but to complement him. It was exactly the kind of family support Haley didn't know she needed until she had it. As for the other billionaires who had tried to adopt her, they had indeed given up the competition as promised. But they hadn't disappeared completely. Beatrice Thompson still sent occasional gifts and heartfelt letters. Richard Morgan had offered future internships at his companies for when the children were older. Sofia Rodriguez organized a fundraising campaign that benefited hundreds of homeless children. Frank Costello had used his political influence to pass stronger legislation protecting abandoned children, and together, all 8 of them had founded the Haley Smith Foundation. The idea had come from Mariah, Robert's lawyer. "You touch the hearts of powerful people," she had explained months ago, "and they want to help. So why not channel that desire into something bigger, something that can help not just you, but hundreds of other children like you?" The foundation would be a center for shelter and support for homeless children. Unlike traditional temporary shelters, the focus would be on keeping families together whenever possible, providing education and psychological support, and helping with the transition to permanent homes without separating siblings. It was all based on Haley's experiences and what she had identified as most important when she was on the streets. Haley had been consulted at every stage of the planning. Her voice, the voice of someone who had actually lived that reality, had shaped policies and procedures. She had insisted that the foundation have psychologists available 24 hours a day, that it have clothes in various sizes always available because dignity starts with appearance, that it serve hot meals at flexible times because street kids don't follow conventional schedules, that it have space for pets because sometimes a stray dog is the only family a child has. And today was the official inauguration. The building was in a central part of the city, strategically located near where many homeless children congregated. It was large enough to comfortably house 50 children, with plans for future expansion. It had classrooms, medical offices, recreation spaces, an industrial kitchen, and what Haley had insisted was essential, an indoor garden where children could connect with nature and peace. When they arrived at the foundation a few hours later, a crowd had already gathered. There were journalists, yes, but also families interested in adopting, volunteers wanting to help, politicians wanting to show support, and most importantly, children and families who could potentially benefit from the services. Haley felt the familiar weight of anxiety begin to build in her chest. It was so many people, so much attention. But then she felt Paul's hand on her shoulder, solid and comforting, and Leah's smaller hand holding hers. She took a deep breath. She wasn't alone. She would never be alone again. The 8 billionaires were all present, standing in a line in front of the building. When they saw Haley, they all smiled with genuine happiness. Beatrice was the first to approach. "Haley, you look beautiful," she said, emotion in her voice. "And what an incredible day. Your legacy begins here." "It's not just mine," Haley corrected gently. "It's all of yours too, and all the children who will be helped here." The ceremony began with speeches. Robert spoke about second chances and family, Richard about social responsibility, Sophia about using influence for good. Each shared their motivations and hopes for the foundation. And then it was Haley's turn to speak. She walked up to the small stage, looked out at the crowd of faces, and for a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm her. But then she saw Paul giving her an encouraging smile. She saw Michael and Leah in the front row looking at her with pride. She saw Robert and Ethan, Beatrice and the others, Mrs. Maria, who had closed her bakery to be there, Ms. Anderson and Dr. Evans, Sarah the social worker. She saw all the people who formed her support network, her extended family, and she saw, scattered throughout the crowd, children who were clearly living on the streets, dirty clothes, cautious eyes, defensive postures, children just like she had been, invisible children the world ignored. Haley began to speak. "My name is Haley Smith, and 6 months ago I lived under an overpass with my 2 siblings. We were cold, hungry, and scared. We were invisible. The world walked past us every day and didn't see us, not because we were small, but because people chose not to look, because it's easier to ignore than to help." Her voice, which had started out shaky, grew stronger. "But one night, everything changed. I did something that made me visible, and suddenly the whole world wanted to see me, to know me, to help me. And I was confused. Why now? Why did I deserve help when I did something heroic, but not when I was just trying to survive?" She paused, letting the question hang in the air. The truth is, every child deserves to be seen. Not because they did something extraordinary, but simply because they exist. Every child on the streets has a story. They have a family that loves or loved them. They have dreams and fears and potential. But society makes them invisible because it's convenient, because acknowledging they exist means having to do something about it. Haley looked directly at the cameras, knowing her words would reach far beyond the crowd in front of her. "This foundation isn't about me. It's about all the children who are still invisible. It's about making sure they are seen, heard, and valued. It's about keeping families together, because separation causes more trauma. It's about providing not just a roof and food, but dignity and hope and a future." Her voice softened, becoming more personal. "When I was on the streets, I dreamed of a safe place. I didn't dream of mansions or wealth. I dreamed of a clean bed, a guaranteed meal, and waking up without fear. I dreamed of normalcy, and now I have that. I have a home, a family, a life, but I will never forget what it was like to be on the other side, what it was like to be invisible." Haley gestured to the building behind her. "This place will make children visible. It will give them what they need to not just survive, but to thrive. And it will do it with respect, with dignity, with love, because every child deserves that, not as charity, but as a basic human right." She looked at the 8 billionaires who had funded the project. "I thank you for using your resources for this, for understanding that true wealth isn't in what we accumulate, but in what we share, for turning your proposals to help me into a commitment to help many." And then Haley looked directly at the street kids in the crowd, speaking now only to them. "And for those of you on the streets right now, I want you to know, you are not invisible. You matter. Your lives have value. And there are people who care, who want to help. This place is for you. Come when you need to. We won't separate you from the people you love. We won't judge you. We will just see you, really see you, and help." When Haley finished, there was a moment of silence, and then applause. Not the polite applause of a formal event, but genuine, emotional applause. Several people were openly crying, including Beatrice and Paul. After the speeches, it was time for the symbolic ribbon cutting. Traditionally, it would have been Hayley alone, but she had another idea. She called Michael and Leah to join her. And then she called 3 children from the crowd who were clearly living on the streets. "You too," Hayley said to them, "because this is yours as much as it is mine." Together, the 6 of them cut the ribbon. And the Hayley Smith Foundation was officially open. The rest of the day was a blur of tours of the building, interviews with journalists and conversations with potential volunteers and donors. Hayley answered questions, posed for photos, explained programs. But the most meaningful moment came late in the afternoon. A girl, maybe 9 years old, shyly approached Hayley. She was dirty with torn clothes and tangled hair, and her eyes had that look Hayley knew so well, the look of someone who had learned to be invisible. "Is it true," the girl asked in a low voice, "that you won't separate families?" "It's true," Hayley confirmed, kneeling to be at the girl's eye level. "Do you have siblings?" The girl nodded. 2, a younger one and an older one. We always stay together." "And you'll stay together," Hayley promised. "If you want help, we can help all 3 of you, without separating you. No scary questions, just real help." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Can I trust you?" It was the same question Hayley had asked so many people over the past few months, and she understood the weight of that question, the risk that came with trust. "You can," Hayley said simply, "because I've been where you are, and I know the most important thing is keeping family together. I promise we'll do that." The girl looked at Hayley for a long moment, assessing, deciding, and then she nodded. "My name is Camilla." "Hi, Camilla. We're going to take care of you and your brothers. Come on, I'll introduce you to the people who will help." In that moment, watching Camilla begin to relax, begin to hope, Hayley felt something come full circle inside her. Her suffering had had a purpose, her struggle had had meaning, and now she could use her experience to ensure that other children didn't go through what she had. Or if they did, that they would get help faster, better, more compassionately. In the weeks and months that followed, the foundation began to operate at full capacity. Dozens of children passed through its doors. Some stayed temporarily while family situations were resolved. Others found permanent homes through the carefully structured adoption program. But all of them left in a better situation than when they arrived. And Hayley remained involved, not in the day-to-day operations, because she had her own life to live, her own childhood to reclaim, but in monthly board meetings, at special events, and at critical decision-making moments. Her voice, the voice of lived experience, continued to shape policies and programs. The media eventually lost interest, as Sarah had predicted. The story of the heroic girl was replaced by other headlines, other scandals, other dramas, and Hayley was grateful for it. She could finally walk down the street without being recognized. She could go to school without reporters. She could just be Hayley, not Hayley the hero. At school she had become just another student. Yes, some knew her story, but most kids were more interested in playing tag at recess than in discussing traumatic pasts. Hayley made friends, girls her age who invited her to birthday parties and sleepovers. She had her first fight with a friend and her first reconciliation. She got bad grades on tests and felt the joy of improving after studying harder. She had all the normal experiences she had been denied. Michael was thriving too. He had become the popular kid who made everyone laugh. His teachers adored him, despite his occasionally excessive energy, and he had finally stopped asking where his mother was, having made peace with the loss in the way a 5-year-old can. And Leah, the most dramatic transformation of all, had found her passion in art. She drew constantly, creating entire worlds of colorful fantasy. The school had noticed her talent and provided extra classes, and Beatrice, who never completely gave up on being part of their lives, had funded professional art supplies. Leah was still shy, but she had found her voice through colors and shapes. Paul continued to be the stable rock in their lives. He wasn't a perfect father, because perfect fathers don't exist. He sometimes lost his patience. He sometimes had to work late and missed Michael's soccer games or Leah's art shows. He sometimes made mistakes in judgment about punishments or boundaries, but he was always present, always trying, always loving them unconditionally. And that was all that mattered. Robert and Paul had developed a mutual respect and even a friendship. They collaborated on raising the children without competition or jealousy. Both understood that children have no limit to the love they can receive, that more support meant more security. They had become co-pillars in the lives of these three children, each contributing in his own unique way. 1 year after the night that changed everything, on an ordinary Friday in November, Haley was in her room doing homework when Paul knocked on the door. "Can I come in?" "Sure." Paul entered holding an envelope. "This came for you today." It was an invitation to an event at the foundation. They were celebrating their first anniversary and wanted Haley to be there as the guest of honor. "Do you want to go?" Paul asked. Haley thought for a moment. Part of her wanted to leave that chapter in the past, to move on without looking back, but another part understood the importance of marking progress, of celebrating victories. "I do," she decided, "but I want the whole family to go. You, Michael, Leah, Robert, Ethan, everyone." "Of course. The whole family it is." The anniversary event was more intimate than the inauguration, less media, more substance. The focus was on the children who had been helped, the families that had been reunited, the real, measurable successes. The IHA Foundation's director, Mrs. Fernandez, presented impressive statistics. 143 children served, 87 families kept together, 56 permanent placements in adoptive homes, all with siblings kept together, 0 forced separations. Success rates far above the national average. But the numbers didn't tell the whole story. The real stories were more impactful. Camilla, the first child Haley had personally welcomed, was there. She and her brothers had been placed with a loving family that had the resources for 3 children. Camilla was clean, well-fed, smiling, a complete transformation. "Thank you," she said to Haley, hugging her tightly. "You saved us. Not just me, but my brothers too." "You saved yourself," Haley corrected. "You made the brave choice to trust, to accept help. That was all you." There were other stories. 6-year-old twins who had been separated by the traditional system but reunited by the foundation. A 14-year-old boy who was now in a vocational program learning carpentry. A young mother who had lost custody of her son but regained it after receiving support from the foundation to get a job and stable housing. Each story was a reminder that one night, one decision, one brave act could create ripples of change that spread far beyond what anyone could have predicted. At the end of the event, Haley was invited to plant a tree in the foundation's garden, a cherry tree that, according to the director, would grow along with the foundation's impact. As Haley dug into the earth with Michael and Leah helping, Paul beside her offering guidance, and Robert taking pictures, she thought about everything that had changed. A year ago, she was under an overpass, invisible, scared, carrying too much responsibility for a 7-year-old. Now she was planting a tree that would grow for decades, a symbol of hope and renewal. "Make a wish," Leah whispered beside her, always the most mystical of the 3. Haley closed her eyes for a moment. She could wish for many things. More resources for the foundation, more families willing to adopt, systemic changes that would prevent children from ending up on the streets in the first place. But in the end, her wish was simple and personal. "I wish that no child ever has to choose between being seen and being safe. I wish they can all be both." When she opened her eyes, she saw everyone looking at her with love and pride. Her family, not the one she was born into, but the one she chose and was chosen by, the family she had built from broken pieces and persistent love. Life would never be perfect. Haley knew that. She would still have hard days. She would still have moments when the trauma of the past would surface unexpectedly. She would still have to deal with loss, with disappointment, with the normal challenges of growing up. But now she had the tools to cope. She had support, she had security, and most importantly, she had real hope, not just desperate wishing. That night, back in the house in Queens after a family dinner and bedtime stories, after checking that Michael and Leah were safe in their rooms, Haley stood at her bedroom window, looking at the stars once more. "We made it, Mom," she whispered again as she had so many times. "We didn't just survive, we're thriving, and now we're helping others do the same." And for the first time, she felt that maybe her mother could really hear her. That from somewhere beyond the stars, Julia was watching her children not just safe but happy, not just surviving, but living. Haley had learned that heroism wasn't about a single moment of courage. It was in waking up every day and choosing to keep going, choosing to trust, choosing to love despite the pain. It was in allowing herself to be vulnerable after building such high walls. It was in accepting help after learning she only needed herself. And she had learned that being invisible had been about survival, but being seen, truly seen and accepted for who she really was, that was living. The years would go on. Haley would grow up, go to high school and eventually college. She would study social work as she had always dreamed, working tirelessly to improve the systems that failed vulnerable children. Michael would become a gym teacher, dedicating his life to ensuring every child had a chance to play and be happy. Leah would become an artist, using her art to give voice to experiences that words couldn't capture. But tonight, Haley was still just 8 years old. She was still a child, and for the first time in a long time, she could simply be that. A child with a family, a home, a future. And that, she finally understood, was the real happy ending. Not mansions or wealth, not fame or recognition, but blessed normalcy, deep security, and unconditional love. Haley lay down in her bed, pulled the soft blankets up to her chin, and closed her eyes. There was no fear of what the morning would bring, only peace, only gratitude, only the quiet knowledge that finally, after fighting for so long, she had come home. And all across the city, in every shadow and under every overpass, there were other Haleys, other invisible children waiting to be seen, waiting for their chance, waiting for someone who cared. Enough to really look. The Haley Smith Foundation would continue its work. More lives would be touched, more families kept together, more children would find their way from invisibility to light. Because Haley had proven that one child, with courage and the right support, could change not only her own destiny but the destinies of hundreds. That trauma did not define a future, that poverty did not determine value, and that every child, absolutely every child, deserved to be seen. The girl who saved a life became an example for a generation, not for being celebrated, but for teaching the world that heroism is about showing up for those who depend on us. That true wealth is measured in lives touched, not in assets accumulated, and that the greatest gift we can give is to make visible those the world insists on ignoring. And so, with that final thought, with peace in her heart and quiet dreams awaiting, Haley Smith slept. A child who had been an adult too soon, now finally having the childhood she had always deserved. Invisible by necessity, visible by choice, and finally completely, eternally home.